we're going to take 3 in a row then.
Okay. Oh, wonderful, okay.
Yeah, Kent Backus with the National Cattle Beef Association. Continuing in this line of questioning, in the past when we dealt with administrations where we did not like policies they were trying to implement, Congress defunded the administration's ability to implement those policies. Is that something that we could possibly see with NAFTA?
Barbara Bowie Whitman. I'm just wondering, what, if any, role is there for the ITC in assessing the impact of withdrawing? We have to have an ITC study before we put an agreement into place. Do they have any role in assessing the impact? We can all speculate on the impact, and lots of institutions are doing studies, but does the ITC come into play here?
Thank you. Bob Vastini, Georgetown Center for Business and Public Policy. Thank you very much, Ken, for another great program and a series, a great series. Anybody here ever hear of trade and services? I've heard tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. You know, most of our trade with Mexico, I think, Gary, is services. And as in many trade agreements, agreements are made which include services. The United States doesn't have to take any legislative action because we've been able to get the partner to adopt our rules, our regulations, our approach. So very little in US laws had to be changed when we joined, for example, an agreement with Colombia or something. And I'm wondering, Gary, if you have any insights into that. I would think that the zombie approach would allow trade and services to continue pretty well because both sides benefit. There would be no reason for the Mexicans to retaliate when they are very engaged, let's say, in the insurance business or other elements of the services trade.
Okay, we're going to just sort of take these one more and then we're going to do all the questions at once.
Last one.
Very
Thank you. As long as it's an easy one.
Eric Coolish, Automotive News. Considering, what are the chances of Congress acting in unison when there's so much split within Congress on trade? You know, TPP was unlikely to get ratified, so can you get enough support there? And then what have you all seen from governors? You know, how are governors weighing in behind the scenes or publicly that have NAFTA trade? Do they have any influence here?
Okay, should we start with defunding? Steve, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yes, Congress has power of the purse. You could, I mean, I guess through the appropriations process. Well, first of all, you have to have an appropriations bill that passes Congress, which is not does not often happen these days. So yeah, but sure. I mean, through the appropriations process, you could try to defund. I mean, I mean, the horse will be out of the barn, though. I mean, if the president announces that he's withdrawing from NAFTA and has effectuated that withdrawal, then you'd have to, go through an appropriations process, which would, I don't know, be the following fiscal year, and you have to go through that process. You have to get the House and the Senate have to pass a bill, and the appropriations bill does have to get signed by the president. So you run into that situation again, and I mean, you could be creative, but I'm not exactly sure what you would be defunding per se. I mean, you could if you could do it ahead of time, you could say, look, the USTR or the president, no money shall be spent on the withdrawal of, to effectuate the withdrawal of the North American Free Trade Agreement. You could do that, although query whether the president could push back and say, well, wait a minute, you're impinging on my constitutional authorities now. But is it a tool? Is it a possible tool? It is, but I think it'd be one that'd be very difficult to implement.
I would just second that if Congress were to act, it could act, for instance, to maintain NAFTA level tariffs, so long as our NAFTA partners do so. So there are legislative steps Congress would take in a PROPS or other bill, but I don't think they would take the act of no fund shall be used to do X if X is, in any way suggesting that Congress has control over the president's constitutional authority, because they do not. They can't say no funds shall be used to withdraw from NAFTA because the president says, well, I don't need your permission to withdraw from NAFTA. I have that constitutional right. So if Congress had the political will to act, it would, I think, act in a different way.
Also, a quick other one thing I just remembered, also there's the issue of whether you're legislating through appropriations, which you're not supposed to do either.
Well, and I guess the only thing I would add is that, on paper, Congress has wide latitude to take any number of options, including holding up appointments and that sort of thing that's completely unconnected. But the political chances of that are an entirely different story, as has been said.
Coming to Bob Bastien's very good question about services, well, he's certainly right. He knows services backwards and forwards. The U.S. has been very successful in all its free trade agreements, and including the TPP, in getting other countries to open their services market to the same extent as the U.S. has opened its, with very, very marginal additional opening by the United States, even in the TPP. So I know that Trump thinks life is unfair and so forth, but in the services area, I mean, we've got better than reciprocity in all these agreements. I think Bob is also right that it would make no sense for Mexico or Canada to put new restrictions on services in the event of termination or withdrawal from NAFTA. But they could, because they committed to a lot of things in the NAFTA in terms of opening. And if they thought that putting a restriction on, well, let's say JP Morgan doing business would somehow ricochet back into the Oval Office, and Gary Cohn would say something to the president, and so on. Well, they might very well do it, just as a negotiating tactic. But I think the basic point that Bob made is correct, that services would be pretty untouched. Now, I think there's a lot of additional liberalization that could be done in services, but I think the existing liberalization would probably pretty much remain in place.
Does anyone want to take the ITC question?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that I can find law saying that ITC would have to do a study on it. It might be a good idea. I mean, and Congress, could act under 332 could ask for a study by the ITC on the possible implementation. I mean, the one other, unpacking the 74 Act, as you always find interesting things, is it does say that if the president, it says the president may at any time terminate in whole or part any proclamation made under this act, and then says before he does so, he has to provide for public hearing to give interested parties a reasonable opportunity to produce evidence to be heard, unless prior hearing would be contrary to national interest, because you need expeditious action, but you still have to do a public hearing afterwards. So there is that provision under the 74 Act. Real quick, on the issue of what are the chances of Congress acting in unison? That's a great question, because I think as having been on the Hill and observing the Hill for a while, it's a hard place to get everybody rowing in the same direction. So even if you have a Republican majority through the remainder of next year, it's obviously a diverse majority with a diverse views and diverse sets of subgroups. So I I think, you know, trying to get Congress to act in unison is a very big challenge, and that's why, you know, all the legislative options that are possible are, you know, the question of whether they're probable or not, I think is the bigger question.
And just on the governor's question, so speaking on behalf of the business community, we're pretty engaged with the governors. I didn't ask the Attorney General question because I just made it up. I mean, there's real concerns, particularly from industry in different states that feel they'd be seriously affected. So yeah, there's a lot of dialogue going on right now in the governor's office.
All right, I think with that, we're going to say thank you to our panel. Thank you very much. I guess my one major takeaway from this event, besides the fact that I think that there's going to be a lot of views presented to the president when the lawyers, the economists, and the businessmen walk into the Oval Office, I guess, and the general too, Gary, is that the lawyers are going to have a lot of chances to bill hours. So with that, thank you. Thanks to all of you for being here. We look forward to seeing you in future WITA events, and watch your inboxes for updates on our 2018 calendar. Thanks, Vanessa, as well, for moderating.